Hi, my name is Andrei Bodrov. I am instructor for Russian motorcycling school motocontrol.ru. Today's weather is just perfect for some motorcycling talk, isn't it? Anyway, one of the most common questions that I get: hey, I'm new rider, which bike should I buy? And usually there are two types of people asking. One genuinely wants my opinion on what motorcycle they should buy. Second is secretly hoping that I'll just confirm their choice. Let's begin with the second group. Usually, if you are already absolutely determined to get a specific bike, a specific model, no matter what, you should just go for it. At the end of the day, motorcycling is about having fun, and if you have to have a specific bike to have fun, go ahead. But if you prefer to play it smart, I have a few extremely subjective but good tips for you. So, stay tuned. Let's talk about what you probably shouldn't choose as your first bike. As a new rider, what's your main objective? If you guessed that is to stop being a beginner and gain some experience, you are 100% correct. Your first bike is merely a way to get your experience. A lot of beginner riders, unfortunately, want to get some heavy, powerful machine right away, to look cool, to prove their manhood or wealth or something of that nature. It's usually not the best way. Let me give you some example. Let's say you want to learn pistol shooting. Which gun you should get? With a 44 Magnum, you'll definitely look cool, but from practical standpoint, you'll have to manage a powerful recoil and you'll have to pay $1 for each round shot, which you are gonna need at least a few thousand rounds to become a straight shooter. Maybe, just maybe, you will learn faster and less expensive with 9mm Glock 17 or something similar. Yeah, you probably won't feel like Dirty Harry, but I can bet you will have much better shooting score at the end of the day. The same thing is with motorcycles. Make no mistake, to become proficient rider, you will have to put some work in it. You'll have to ride thousands of miles and you'll have to go through some sort of training. And you'll drop your bike a few times as well. There is no way around it, unfortunately. So it makes much more sense to start on lighter, smaller bike. It will have manageable power output, so you won't end up like this guy, crashing right out of the dealer's gate. Small bike will not eat through tires and fuel like a big powerful motorcycle will. It may not seem much difference at first, but when you multiply it by thousands and tens of thousands of miles, trust me, your wallet will feel the difference. Dropping light bike also costs less, both in money and in back pain. So please, don't rush to buy some freaking liter sport bike or Harley Tourer as your first bike just because they look cool. Speaking of sport bikes and Harleys, regardless of weight and engine size, sport bikes are not usually a best option for a beginner due to their specific body position. Sport bikes force you to sit in shrimp-like aerodynamics body position, which is perfectly fit for a 15-minute track session, but not so much for daily rider. A very common beginner sport bike rider mistake is this body position, which when rider wants to straight his back and straight and lock his elbows. That way you can't make any good steering inputs because you are not essentially pushing or pulling the handlebars. You are pushing them from above, from the top, which is pretty much useless. Besides, on a sport bike, front wheel has very little travel from lock to lock, which makes tight space maneuvering very difficult. Cruisers, on the other hand, are much more fit as a daily riders, but they are not perfect choice either. With the cruiser's low ground clearance, you can't really learn speed cornering techniques to a full extent. And cruisers are also tend to force you in one particular sitting position. You can move your body marginally, but really not very much. So if you buy a cruiser as your first bike, well, You can make it work, but you'll just miss a lot of useful stuff you can learn. Okay, but what bike will help you learn what you should get as a beginner? In my opinion, the best types of motorcycle for new rider are standard naked bikes or dual sports. And here's why. On an upright bike or on dual sport, you'll have both very good available lean angle and very good steering angle. This means you can learn both high-speed cornering and confined space maneuvering. Also, these bikes give you plenty of space to move around. You can play with your body position and learn the effects of loading the front tire, the rear tire, counterbalancing and leaning into the turn. On top of that, these bikes put you in very natural riding position, so you can ride them for hours with no fatigue. This is exactly what you, as a new rider, needs. Put some extra miles under your belt. Another very valuable feature on these bikes is that it's usually very little damage when you crash them. For example, this is my training bike, which I dropped and low-sided probably hundreds of times, but it suffers very little damage. You may bend the brake lever or shifter pedal, and that's pretty much it. With naked bikes or with dual sports, you may install some crash bars or cage, and you can drop it as much as you want with literally no damage at all. You definitely can't drop sport bike or luxury tourer that easily. You'll end up with a couple of $100 damage each time you drop a bike. And as a beginner, you'll do it quite a lot if you are planning to actually learn to ride. Another very important thing for a beginner rider is ABS system. Here I'll just say that it's statistically proven fact that ABS on a bike reduces the chance of serious accident by 50%. Proper braking technique is a big topic and you can't master it very fast. So ABS system is especially good for a new rider. It's very well worth every buck you'll spend on it. Every bike intended for public roads should have this system. It's literally life-saving feature, so you really want it. With all that being said, let's have a look at 3 models which I think you're worthy to be considered a good motorcycle for a beginner rider. I'm sure there are much more of them, but these 3 I have actually rode and found very interesting. First and foremost, the best beginner bike in my opinion for most people, KTM 390 or 250 Duke. I put them together because it's essentially the same motorcycle. Same chassis, same frame, same suspension, etc. Even the engine is pretty much the same. The only difference is the cylinder bore. I sincerely think that in most cases 250 or 390 Dukes are the best motorcycle for beginner riders, for a number of reasons. First, they handle really well. The steering is very precise and predictable. Bike flips from side to side on a dime. On Duke you can learn slow speed riding, gymkhana style riding, knee down, high speed cornering, wheelies, stoppies, tire slides. It will do anything you want. It's a perfect bike for a heavy city traffic. It's insanely maneuverable and it's not a slow bike either. It's easily keep up on a speedway. Dukes are very light, so if you drop it, you can pick it up alone quite easily. If you put some basic engine protection and lever protection on it, you can drop it almost with no damage. Maybe scratch a tank panel, nothing major. If you install crash cage, bike becomes bomb-proof. You can drop it as much as you want, with no damage at all. You know how it is. Low mileage, never dropped. All in all, 390 Duke is awesome bike and you'll benefit greatly if you get it as your first bike. Now a few drawbacks. If you are a smaller person and you like to put both feet on the ground, you may not like the seat height. I usually teach to put on only one foot at the stop, so it's not a major issue for my students, but it's worth mentioning anyway. Next one is brakes. Vibra brakes have acceptable stopping power, but the feedback is very spongy. When you apply brakes, it's very hard to feel precise braking amount. You'll get used to it, but it's a bummer anyway. Suspension is very basic also. Yes, it does its job, but barely, to be honest. It doesn't have any damping adjustments, so you are stuck with it. I weigh 85 kilos, and I think it's slightly above what the suspension is intended for. Even in maximum preload, SAIC is barely acceptable. Consider your height too. I'm 186 centimeters, it's 8'1", and it's as tall as I would go on this bike, probably even a bit less. The riding position itself is good enough, but my legs are crumpled a bit. Not too much, but if you are higher than me, you better look at 390 Adventure version. And the last issue with 390 Duke for me is cooling system. It's good for 250, never had a problem with it, but 390 tends to overheat if you are doing slow speed stuff in warm weather. So if you live in hot climate, you may consider 250 instead of 390. Second good beginner bike, in my opinion, is BMW G390R. Like 390 Duke, it's a very nice light nimble bike with a upright body position. Personally, I think Duke is overall a better option because it handles better. But you may still look at BMW if you prefer a low seat height. In other aspects, G390R is very close to 390 Duke. It has the same basic brakes, slightly different but the same level basic suspension. It also handles very well, and unlike 390 Duke, doesn't tend to overheat. Overall, 390R is a very good choice for a new rider, especially for a shorter and lighter one. If you're a taller person, you may consider KTM 390 Adventure. Don't let the marketing tricks fool you. It's still street bike, maybe with a little off-road flair, but essentially it's a street bike. It's built on a Duke platform, so it's very nimble, handles awesome, has same engine with same fun character and overheating issues. Suspension is little better. Now it has some adjustments, but to be honest, I wouldn't call it state of the art. Personally, considering the price difference, I would prefer Duke version over the Adventure. But Adventure is still very good option, especially if you are taller rider. So, that was my 3 go-to beginner bike options. Pick the one you like better, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. All these 3 bikes are fairly priced, sturdy built, and don't suffer much from a falls. They are rather popular, so you won't have any problem selling them when you feel ready to move on. All in all, great bikes, very good for a new rider. Okay, time to move to my bonus motorcycle.
Bonus! That's good. Yeah, that's awesome. Throw me a frickin' bonus here. Oh! I haven't laughed that hard since I was a little girl, thank you.
If you just don't settle for previous 3 bikes and despite all reasons still want to begin on heavy powerful machine to prove your mettle, there is still somewhat decent option for you. It's not a good beginner bike by any means, it's more like less bad one. And our winner is BMW F900 XR. Why that's so? As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, it's very beneficial for your first bike to have a good upright body position, good lean angle and good front wheel turning angle. This crossover type of bikes, such as 900 XR or Yamaha Tracer, have all these things. They are better for beginner than typical nakeds, like for example Ducati Monsters, because these crossovers have much more handlebar travel and more upright position. On the other hand, they still have sticky road tires, firm road suspension and big powerful brakes, which traditional adventure bikes kind of lack. And out of all crossover type bikes, in my opinion, 900 XR is the better option. The engine has very predictable power delivery, bike has all sorts of foolproof electronic systems which you are not really supposed to rely on, but for a new rider it's kind of necessary with this much power. In stock form there is a lot of vulnerable parts, but you can fortify this bike with aftermarket crash protection and then drop it with almost no damage. Brembo brakes are just phenomenal, very powerful and give very clear feedback. And steering feels very good. Bike tips from side to side very fast. I noticed that this steering behavior really helps students to understand counter steering earlier. By the way, that's partially why I think 250 390 Dukes are the best bikes for motorcycling schools. They also have very clear, almost effortless steering. In this regard, 900 XR is better than Tracer, which is too stable. It won't stand up a bit too much. On slow speeds, front wheel tends to fold into the turn a little bit. It's perfectly normal, but usually it intimidates new riders and it's very hard for them to practice full lock exercises. On BMW, on the other hand, steering is almost neutral, which feels much more friendlier, so to speak. Considering all this, a 900 XR is not my go-to choice for a new rider. It's one of the least bad choices available if you want to start with big, powerful bike right out of the gate. Now, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. If you like motorcycle related videos, subscribe and don't forget to like and to share this video if you want more people to watch it. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And I'm gonna head home now. It's freezing here. Bye.